6 years ago, I bought this Tudor Black Bay 58 from the AD. Fast forward to today and I still have it in my watch collection. In today's video, we will do a long-term review of this watch and talk a little bit about the industry and how it has changed, partially thanks to this timepiece. My name is Oleg and that right there is Mr. Bond. In 2019, Tudor was a completely different company to what it is right now. I think this watch here is partially responsible for transforming the company. Prior to this release, Tudor didn't really have any of these waiting list type models, and actually the models that they had weren't as hot. Since then, in the Black Bay 58 model line alone, we got the blue accents version, we got the silver case version, a gold case version, a bronze case version, a GMT version, and finally this year the burgundy version on the Jubilee style bracelet. And that's just talking about the Black Bay 58. Of course, we also got the Black Bay 68, we got the Black Bay 54, there's the Blue Lagoon, which right now is very popular. Needless to say, Tudor has really expanded their catalog, but it all started from this model. And to my understanding, this is still one of the more popular versions of the Black Bay 58. I have a couple of friends who have owned this version as well as the blue dial version, and the blue version was gone from their collection. This version stayed in their collection, and I personally still have this watch. I think there's just something very charming about this watch specifically. I know it sounds strange in 2025 to talk about a 39mm diver watch as a unique type of a case design, but back 6 years ago, a lot of people were complaining that this watch is too small. And I think to this day, it has inspired so many other companies to create smaller diver watches based on the success of this model. But not only was this watch smaller in terms of the diameter, it was also quite a bit thinner than a lot of competition on the market. It's only about 11.9mm in case height, including this domed sapphire crystal. These dimensions fit majority of the wrists really well. I have about a 7.5 inches wrist, and the watch looks great on my size of a wrist. If you have a smaller size wrist, it also looks great. And I think that was the general appeal of this watch to a large portion of a watch collecting community. And I think that's why right now we are seeing so many other watch companies come out with their 39mm versions of diver watches. We even have companies like Panerai, Breitling, and Blancpain, companies that historically have large diver watches, now offering watches in the smaller cases. And I believe that this watch is to thank for it, because they saw the success that Tudor has had with this model and they want to replicate this success. The other thing that this watch has achieved in terms of changing the watch industry is that vintage inspired design. Prior to this watch, yes, we did have other watches with the vintage inspired aesthetic, but they weren't as popular as this watch became. And again, thanks to that, we have seen a wave of other watch companies introduce divers and chronographs and everyday watches with that vintage motif. 6 years ago, the gilt accents and the faux patina was very unique. Not a lot of other watches had it. Now, of course, this design element is very popular. Even a lot of micro brands are introducing similar design aesthetic. And because Tudor Black Bay 58 has inspired so many other watch companies to go with smaller diver watches and the vintage design aesthetic, this watch right now seems a little bit less unique because we got so many other watches that are sort of competing with it. At the same time, it doesn't feel as outdated. I mean, it still is a fairly new watch, 6 years old in a watch design terms is a baby, but nevertheless, this watch, to me at least, feels just as fresh today as it did 6 years ago, and that's again thanks to the way the fashion has evolved. The only thing that kind of dates this watch a little bit are these faux rivets on the bracelet. I think this trend did not really catch on. We haven't seen too many other watch brands try to replicate it. There were a few watches here and there, but they weren't very successful, so I think that's the only design element that has been dropped and that a lot of people still don't really like. But besides the faux rivets, everything else about this bracelet is excellent. It has really nice and tight tolerances. It does taper from the lugs all the way down to the clasp. The clasp is designed as the Tudor shield. It has the fold-over safety mechanism, and of course it is an engineered clasp with 3 micro adjustments. As you can see, my bracelet is quite beaten up because I own this watch for 6 years, and this is not a safe queen. I really do use this watch all the time. In fact, this is one of my favorite watches to take on vacation. The scuffs, the scratches, all of that are just part of its story. Now, the element of this watch that I was worried the most about in terms of wearability and longevity was the bezel insert, since this watch does feature a metal bezel insert as opposed to a ceramic bezel insert like it was very common for luxury watches back in 2019. That's where the industry was sort of moving towards. Once again, this watch sort of became an outlier with a metal bezel insert. It was a lot of debate about this choice. However, right now we can see that a lot of other watch companies are also choosing metal bezel inserts. I think they again create that vintage aesthetic. Now, I'm happy to say that this bezel insert has held up quite well. I can't really see too many scuffs or scratches on this bezel. Maybe I was just lucky and I didn't really have a chance to really scratch it, but comparing it to the rest of the case, I think the bezel held up really well. It held up much better than some of the other elements, like for instance the side of the case that's finished in high polish. There's a pretty nasty scuff there and I can't get it out for many years. The other element of the watch that held up surprisingly well is this crown at the 3 o'clock position. It is an unprotected crown, and once again it's one of those design elements that you really have to test out over a long period of time, see how it holds up. Happy to say I have absolutely no problems with it. It still operates nice and smoothly, and I never really had any issues with this crown being exposed. In terms of the movement powering this watch is the COSC certified caliber MT5402. Tudor has used this movement in many other watches since the release of this one. It beats at 4 Hz and it comes with 70 hours of power reserve. This was again a pretty good value proposition 6 years ago. Not too many watches came with 70 hours of power reserve. Again, this watch could be credited for starting that new trend of higher power reserve. I know it's not the first watch, but it's one of the first popular watches to have longer power reserve, and customers really liked that element, and I think a lot of other watch companies have followed suit since, and they're still doing it, increasing the power reserve to 60, 70, sometimes 80 hours. Now, in terms of the movement accuracy, I have no problems with it. This caliber held up really well. At the time, it was a fairly new movement, and with new movements, you never know how the longevity and the accuracy will be. Happy to say I have absolutely no problems. The watch is keeping great time. It is still within 2 to 4 seconds per day. And over the years, this watch has dealt with shock, with water, with magnetism from electronics and such. And even right now, it is still very accurate. I haven't serviced this watch yet. Probably in the next few years, I will have to, and perhaps I'll do another update 10 years on the wrist if I'm still making watch videos on YouTube, and if this watch is still in my collection, which I think it will be, because over the years the watch landscape has changed. As I said, a lot of other mainstream companies have caught up and sort of copied and homaged this watch quite a bit. But on top of that, we also had quite a few micro brands come up. When this watch was released in 2019, there were, of course, a lot of other micro brands. However, micro brands were sort of under $500. That was their sweet spot. The quality was great for that price point, but they weren't really competing with companies like Tudor, like Breitling. They were more so competing with companies like Citizen and Seiko. Nowadays, there is such a wide range of different microbrand companies that a lot of them are currently actually competing in terms of the quality, in terms of their packaging with watches like this one. So all of that is to say that even though there is so much more competition on the market right now for a watch like this, I still prefer to wear this one. This watch has saved me from purchasing a lot of other watches because just like with my Explorer, I keep on thinking, all right, if I buy this diver, would I prefer to wear it or would I prefer to wear the Tudor Black Bay 58? And so far, the Tudor Black Bay 58 has been winning out. It's just such an easy watch to put on your wrist. The question then becomes, should you purchase one of these watches now in 2025 or 2026, whenever you're watching this video? I think that's a harder question to answer now than it was when this watch came out. As I said, this watch inspired so many other watches that there weren't too many other options like it. Nowadays, there are so many other options that you could go for something way cheaper, something under 2 grand, something around $1,000 that would give you a lot of the same feeling. The smaller case, the vintage inspired design language, the thinner profile, and pretty good build quality. However, if you like Tudor and if you like this watch specifically, I don't think you'll be disappointed even 6 years on. I still think this is an excellent choice for a diver, and to this day it is still one of my favorite divers on the market. Those were my thoughts on the watch. Please leave a comment in the comment section below. Let me know what your thoughts on this watch are. Do you have one in your collection? Have you sold one from your collection? If so, why did you do it? Do you regret doing it? Are you happy you did it? Also, what other watch alternatives would you consider instead of this timepiece? I think all of that is a very fun discussion. It is also probably helpful to someone who's looking at purchasing one of these watches in 2025. And I appreciate you watching this video all the way until the end. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the YouTube channel for more videos like this, and we'll see you next time. Bye.